Well, Fridgies, what's Erin Patterson gone and got herself into this time? It seems this mushroom trial is truly far from over, with EPAT's newly uncovered lies popping up like weeds. What's this about a spreadsheet? What's this about rat poison? What happened an hour after the lunch ended? Let's take a look. Welcome back, Fridgies, to I Think My Fridge is Haunted, a very creepy podcast for very creepy people. You know how it goes. And if you're not up to date with the mushroom trial, I've got a whole playlist on the YouTube channel. Go check it out. There's all the episodes on there. Once you've watched those, I'll meet you back here in about 11 hours. So to everyone else who's up to date, let's get to it. So I was here in the studio on Friday recording some hard-hitting content, and I popped across the road to see my friends at Little Shop of Horrors. Check it out, it's rad. And they were like, oh my God, did you see all the stuff that's come out today? And I'm like, no, what happened today? I was like, I haven't been online yet, I've just been recording. Well, Fridgies, the suppression order has been lifted and the media dropped some bombshells that prove once again that EPAT truly does sit on a throne of lies. As always, I'll only be covering the most interesting parts, but my lord, I know I'll be missing some bits and pieces because so much happened. So let's get to it. So it turns out that Erin's whole story, told under oath in front of the court and in front of everybody, about how after the lunch guests left, she ate all that cake and threw up the cake and the beef Wellington because of the bulimia, which wasn't actually bulimia, that used to be the cancer, but also wasn't cancer. Anyway, that's why she didn't get as sick as the others, allegedly. But we all know that she was ODing on the Metamucil before she went to the hospital that she hated, even though she apparently wanted to be a nurse. It's just weird. Now, Fridgies, if you're sufficiently lost, that's okay. Let me rewind to what really happened after the lunch guests left. EPAT went to the tip. That's right. That whole cake story? Apparently she left out how she literally left the house after everybody left. And I'll tell you what I think she was doing there. Remember Heather kept telling Ian and Simon that she thought it was very weird that Erin served them all grey plates and she served herself a smaller tan-coloured plate. And then the police couldn't find a trace of any of the plates that Heather described. And then EPAT tried to gaslight Ian Wilkinson into thinking he'd been completely misunderstood. And this is a guy that's highly educated. Could it be possible that she was dropping off her poison by numbers crockery, never to be seen again? The crockery that she thought A, no one would have noticed because no one's smarter than EPAT, and B, no one would talk about because by this time tomorrow, in her head, they'll all be dead. Which brings me to my next point. And it's a point of epic speculation. Why didn't they take any photos on that day that Erin had so vigorously marketed as a very special lunch, and possibly the last special lunch we'll ever be able to have together as a family? You know, because of the gastric bypass surgery. I can't even. I feel like such an idiot for giving her the benefit of the doubt during the trial. I feel so dumb for thinking maybe it was just all an accident. But if this lunch was so special and Dawn and Gail and Heather and Ian were such close family, why didn't they take some pics in the garden, around the table? Pics that could have given us some more detail as to those coloured plates. It's pretty clear they weren't that close. They just weren't close enough to be taking family photos together. But let's move on. And Fridgies, I know you've been pulling your hair out, trying to figure out why the hell those initial 4 counts of attempted murder were mysteriously dropped the day before the trial started, way back in May. Yeah, May. That's how long we've been tuning into this case. But those charges were dropped, and we all know what they related to. That apparently EPAT had been poisoning her estranged husband, poor long-suffering Simon, for years. Well, I had a comment here on the channel a few weeks ago from someone called Bestler, and that read, quote, Simon had actually made a spreadsheet of all his mystery illnesses to see if he could find a correlation, and that's when he noticed it was always after EPAT fed him. Shortly after that, he stopped accepting food from Erin, and it came to the point he warned Don that he thought EPAT was trying to poison him. He also told his doctor. Don didn't want Simon's fears being spread through their community. so that it wouldn't look bad on EPAT and the family, so nothing was ever said or done. She also says, this info apparently isn't available to Australians due to court orders, but overseas YouTubers can access it. So that's why we're not hearing about any of this until now. And I was like, these are seriously incriminating claims if they are indeed true. And if that is the case, when will they be addressed? When will they be addressed? Could it be that the court decided to put those charges on the back burner while they got the epic amount of evidence together that they needed to examine each time Simon got sick? It doesn't seem so. We don't know why those charges were dropped. Apparently Simon doesn't even know why those charges were dropped. We do know that it appears that the charges regarding Simon were supposed to form a whole other trial, separate from the one regarding Don, Gail, Heather and Ian. But it turns out that this spreadsheet rumour was a real thing, and that Simon and Erin had arranged to go on about 3 different camping trips over 2021 and 2022, during which Erin prepared food which was then consumed by Ian. Another time she gave him cookies that she had made that he just didn't want to risk getting sick again, so he took a tiny bite and then he decided to throw them out. On 4 occasions, he became so ill after eating Erin's food that he had to go to hospital, even having surgery to remove part of his bowel and leaving him staying with either Erin or his parents for weeks while he returned to health. I found it interesting that on the majority of the occasions he got sick, they were based in a remote location, camping. Could it be that if she had allegedly poisoned him on all of those occasions, that he would have been treated at hospitals away from Leongatha so that the local doctors wouldn't start getting suspicious? Now, this camping trip timeline is the Diet Coke with ice version of a much longer story. But it's interesting to note that soon, in late 2022, Simon told his dad, Don, that he had suspected Erin had been poisoning him for the past 1.5 years, and that's why he'd been getting so ill. Simon decides to change his next of kin and power of attorney to his dad, Don, and removing EPAT, who had formerly been listed. Because while he was in hospital, the hospital had to call EPAT as the next of kin to get her permission for him to have surgery. Simon decides never to eat in Erin's presence again because she's clearly got it in for him, which was a smart move on his part. But he wasn't allowed to mention any of this in court in May 2025, so that's why he had to stick to that vague reason of why he couldn't attend the July 29 lunch, that he was uncomfortable. He couldn't say, I didn't go because I suspected she was slipping me death roofies in curries and bolognese since 2021. He wasn't allowed to talk about any of that in court. So that's why he said he was uncomfortable. Now, Don tells him to keep his suspicions to himself, which I think is wise advice, because if it was all a big mix-up, it would have certainly destroyed their already rocky relationship. And seeing as they had kids, she could have made things very difficult for Simon. So Simon tells a local doctor, Dr. Chris Ford, of his fears, as well as his cousin Tim. After speaking to these 2 trusted people, Simon begins putting together that spreadsheet detailing when he got sick and the proximity between the illness and Simon eating EPAT prepared food. Another thing I find very interesting is that all this happened around September 22, and what happened in November 2022? Erin was not invited to Gail's birthday dinner, and she got so mad. By the time Ian and Heather started to feel sick the night of the lunch, Simon knows his worst fears have come true. Erin has done the unthinkable. Simon tells Ian and Heather that night that they should go to the hospital because what they thought was gastro could be something much, much worse. And that's when Heather must have talked about the grey plates and the 1 tan plate. She knew that something was up. And I'll tell you one thing I know, and I've said this before, it's that boomers notice crockery. Every time. EPAT can gaslight Ian all she wants, but Heather knew. Well, after taking them to hospital sometime that night, Simon must have called his friend Dr. Ford, because the following morning at 9 a.m, Dr. Ford was on the phone to your friend and mine, Dr. Webster. And he tells Dr. Webster that he's got a couple of patients that have potentially suffered some sort of poisoning at a lunch that a woman named Erin Patterson was hosting. So remember that name, Dr. Webster, because she's dodgy. Dr. Webster has eagle eyes waiting for this woman to appear. And so when she finally does come in on the Monday morning, he's like, "I've been waiting for you, Mrs. Patterson." And he's like pointing to his eyes and pointing to her eyes and saying, I know. That didn't happen. I made that up. But if all that wasn't enough, poor Don was taken to hospital. And what's he taken with him? A jar of his own vomit. Because he knows his son was telling the truth when he said there was a possibility that all of his illnesses could have been directly related to EPAT. It's at this juncture that we learn of a meeting of the siblings and cousins of the Wilkinson-Patterson clan. They meet in the chapel of the Austin Hospital, and Simon tells them all of his theory. It's then that they go to the police. So, Fridgies, let's fast forward again to today. If the attempted murder charges had been upheld and went to court after the first trial, and the jury had decided on a not guilty verdict, where would we be? It's baffling to me that this evidence was not allowed in the first trial, and I'd love for you to give me your opinions in the comments section. It reminds me of when Greg Lynn was convicted of the murder of Carol Clay, and then all that terrible news about him came out straight after the court case, and there was all this stuff about him being allegedly awful to his first wife, who was found to have allegedly died by suicide in 1999, and there was domestic violence and all this stuff. But by the time all that stuff came out, the jury had already found him not guilty of the death of Russell Hill. That's a discussion for another episode, and trust me, we will get there. I just need to read the book on that case first. Fridgies, I think we can all agree that this trial has more facets than a disco ball. But I know what you're wondering. If this does go to trial, will Dr. Webster be reprising his role in this reality TV show from hell? Please let me know your opinions in the comments section below. I love reading your comments. And as always, be creepy, but don't be a creep.